And then we were brought back. We found ourselves on the stage. The underclothing underneath this suit was just stuck to me, and they actually had to pour my boots out on the stage. And that wasn't because they were inundated with water at the end of the probe. That was my own perspiration from the heat of that particular chronovisor. And I asked where my dad was, and then the team leader explained that he had to go to the next room because she said, "You disappeared, son, and your dad had to spend some quiet time adjusting to that fact." So then I was taken down the hallway and debriefed by a lieutenant commander for the Office of Naval Intelligence, and he said, "Andy, okay, tell me about the target." And I said, "Sir, the target was underwater." And he became very consternated. He actually got up and started smoking and pacing around his office. And he said, "How do you know it was underwater?" And I said, "Well, when you put me down near the target, I could see that there was algae on the columns of the building." And then the next week, when we were back in the learning lab at our school, we asked the team leaders who were training us what the building was and what year it was, and they acknowledged that it was the U.S. Supreme Court building in the year 2013. Now, in talking about this technically assisted form of remote viewing that I was involved in that particular probe, there has been the assumption that I'm saying that we have to have a planetary catastrophe in 2012, for example, which is the year that obviously that everybody's looking to because that's the year that the Mayan calendar ends. And catastrophe has been predicted by some theorists that's what 2012 inevitably has to involve. But I need to make clear that, just to be fair, that during all of the chronovisor probes, not the teleportation transits, but the chronovisor probes in this sort of supraluminal realm where alternate futures are possible, we were accessing alternate past and future timelines or dimensions, if you will, in the multiverse. For example, when I was jumping to the past via the chronovisor array in New Mexico, when I was spending those secret summers in New Mexico with my dad, they were sending me over and over again to Ford's Theater on April 14th, 1865, which was the night that Abraham Lincoln was shot there by John Wilkes Booth, in the timeline that we're in. And they were trying to ascertain who shot President Lincoln. Was it John Wilkes Booth? Was it Colonel Rathbone? Was it Mrs. Lincoln pulling a derringer out of her purse because she was angry at him? Or was it a third party? You know, was John Wilkes Booth up in the balcony seating there to shoot the president or to rescue him or even to give him an autograph or get his autograph? So they kept on sending me over and over again in this chronovisor probe to the front of Ford's Theater, and they had me dressed in this sort of fancy society kid sort of clothing, and I was talking my way past the ticket agent saying, "My folks, you know, my parents are already inside and they presented my ticket, so please let me enter and, you know, rejoin my parents." And then I was basically going into the theater, but then walking up the staircase up to the area behind President Lincoln's booth to try to witness the assassination, which I never ended up doing. In fact, that was a part of a number of probes that I was involved in related to the Civil War period and President Lincoln. And so what I was noticing is every time they sent me to that same day in the life of the United States and of Abraham Lincoln, my experiences there would change a little bit. You know, the guy at the ticket booth would say something different. I would find something different when I walked up the staircase up to his booth and so forth. So I was present at the meeting at the Sandia National Lab Auditorium, that is to say the Sandia Auditorium in Sandia, when there was a meeting among about 20 attendees from the project, at which there were about 20 or 30 of the project engineers like my dad present, and they shut down time travel to the past because the man who was one of sort of the assistant directors of the project was explaining that every time they sent the same child or another child to the same event in history in the chronovisor, it would change a little bit, or even change substantially, indicating that the chronovisors were sending the chrononaut to alternate timelines. And so it was an alternate timeline in 2013 that I was sent to in that chronovisor probe on November 5th of 1971, and hence I don't want to be relied upon to state that inevitably there has to be a disaster of a planetary nature, the nature of a planetary catastrophe in 2012. I'm encouraging people to think of 2012 as something quite the opposite, which would be the year that we finally resolve to create a sustainable civilization on Earth and go about the business of starting to achieve essentially the planetary cultural renaissance we need to survive and thrive in the 21st century. And so I just want to clarify this particular point because I've been misquoted widely about this, for example, by the journal called Russian Scientist, where they stated that, a lawyer who was involved in U.S. time travel research in the early 70s is stating that, 2012 is when, when this mass disaster is going to occur on planet Earth. I don't believe that. I don't see that now. And I do know that scenario, which I shared with Project Camelot, that is to say, Bill Ryan and Terry Cassidy at Project Camelot are friends of mine, and I discussed how during that particular chronovisor probe, yes, some kind of catastrophe had occurred by 2013. But again, this was one slice of the multiverse. This was one alternate future that the chronovisor was capturing the signal of and amplifying before it happened so that we could perceive it as the virtual time travelers visiting that environment. But I don't believe that there necessarily has to be a global catastrophe of some kind in 2012, and I believe that if we set our intention for the beginning of a utopian period of human history in 2012, when calendars are no longer necessary, or for example, where we're, like the Mayan calendar, for example, or where we begin to implement a global program of teleportation to start removing all those greenhouse gases from the global atmosphere, that 2012 could be literally the most significant and benevolent year in human history if that's what we want it to be. And so I just wanted to set the record straight on your show because I know that you've been doing a lot of really excellent reportage about 2012, and I want to join in that discourse in a way that's true to what happened to me when I was a trial participant on Project Pegasus.